The only way that humans will thrive, not just survive, but thrive in the digital age, was for us to be lifelong learners. And that stuck with me. So when I think about who stands to benefit most from my continued learning, I do. Who has the most control over what content I choose to put in my brain? Me.
Hey everybody, this is Jeremy Thieme from Tutor Collegiate Strategies, and you're about to check out the latest episode of the Mission of Mission podcast, a show that's designed to help higher ed become better recruiters, communicators, marketers, and managers. Each week I'll introduce you to an industry leader or difference maker who will share helpful advice, tips, and strategies that will help you grow professionally and personally. Mission of Mission is part of the Enrollify podcast network. I'm excited to share my latest candid conversation, so let's get started. Hey everybody, it's Jeremy Thieme, and this is episode 36 of the Mission Admissions podcast. I'm super excited to introduce everyone to a wonderful higher ed leader, Sacha Thieme from Indiana University. The Hoosier roots run very deep in the Thieme household. My wife was a second generation IU grad, and she's already working very hard, as I shared with Sacha, to convince our 14-year-old daughter to follow the trend and be a third generation Hoosier. So welcome to the show, Sacha.
Thanks so much, Jeremy. I'm excited to be here for sure.
So there's a lot I want to pick your brain about today. Let's just dive right in. I would love to start with this conversation around staff retention. I know it's something I feel like I've been having more and more conversations, especially the last 12 to 24 months around. And you've worked in the industry for more than 20 years. I know you know a lot of people at various levels, and I would just love to get your take on why you think so many admission offices are struggling the last few years when it comes to keeping their staff motivated and engaged.
Oh gosh. Yeah, it has been a journey for sure. You know, when I think about most humans resist change. And over those years, it was all change. And most of it was entirely unwelcomed. We didn't invite it. We didn't choose it. We didn't understand it. We couldn't create context around it. So the other piece of this is that for those of us in enrollment and admissions, it required immediate and complete change in procedure and practice. So it wasn't, every year we worked to improve our processes, we worked to better serve students, but this was just a complete abrupt change. So the nature of how we do things like recruitment while introducing new and really important practices that are still around today, it still required significant focus and attention that was made all the more challenging due to very personal experiences that staff were negotiating. So over the last then few years, as we have kind of come out of the hardest points of that pandemic, we are now entering a yes and situation. Now, yes and works beautifully if you are trying to create a staff culture and you're, creating some buy-in, but yes and when it means an additive volume of work is not as welcome and is much more difficult to manage. So there was that component that we are still trying to work through. How do we continue to build back those in-person practices and celebrate the incredible value of things like virtual? And how do we do that with the resources that we are given? So there was just this volume challenge. The other piece that I think has created a challenge is just this reckoning with what we value and how we value work, or how we value what activities and tactics go into that work. One thing I'll share that I believe has prolonged kind of this experience of burnout was the sense of delayed burnout. And I really saw this specifically with our managers, and we're having a retention challenge, yes, with staff, but also senior leaders in the field who are moving into other spaces. And I'm so excited for my friends that are making those choices because they're doing great work wherever they go. But we also need to have incredible leadership and strong leadership for the future of our of our work and the integrity of our work. So coming back to this idea of delayed burnout over the last, specifically the most recent years, these were the leaders who were in positions to directly support the staff and drive these changes. They held it together. They were the change agents. And like sometimes when you're pushing hard to get to a vacation, then you get to the vacation and then you get sick, right? So I think our leaders were pushing hard to be those change agents, and then they had their burnout later. And I think that's happened most recently. So when you say in the last 3 to 4 years, I believe there were waves of this that we saw. And most recently now we're seeing the wave of those who really help inform and drive that strategy. So I'm excited to say, I think that I feel like we're turning a corner. So just like with students entering college this year, I see us coming out of this period. And so I'm looking at the next few years with hope in a different way. But it's been difficult.
It's 100% been difficult. And I love that you hit on not just at the younger or junior level, if you want to call it that, but, we was talking with a guest on a podcast episode I recently was a part of, and your level leadership again has had more openings, I feel like, than ever before the last 2 to 3 years. And it's for a whole host of reasons, but you hit on two big ones there that I think 100% are spot on, which is, first of all, this concept of change. And I would love to just, get some additional thoughts from you. How do you effectively then, knowing that change is going to be a constant, not just in higher ed, but any industry, how do you get your team, or how do you support your leadership under you to deal more effectively with change?
This is absolutely where we are. And I'm one of the few things that we've done, flipping the script, if you will, on change happening to us and us working to own the narrative of that change. We did not have that luxury in the pandemic. And I think sometimes you reference leadership changes at kind of the enrollment leadership level, we're seeing these changes at the institutional level for sure. And as new leaders come in, of course, they want to come in with fresh ideas, and they want to make their mark, and they want to impart change. And so that is going to require us to, again, flip that script and try to own that narrative. We're treating everything right now as learning. And I can expand on kind of that idea of professional growth and learning. But how much can we learn to do our work better? Because that is an area that we can absolutely own. If we take that learning and apply that to push that narrative of change, then we have assumed our agency throughout that entire process.
How much do you think it's mindset, though? Because I feel like so much of it, as I have conversations, Sacha, comes back to this idea of, to your point, we know it's inevitable and we have to take ownership of it. And so then aren't we responsible to say, then our mindset has to be, for example, if we have data that says this might work better than what we're doing, or something's not working, but this data says they want this instead, do we have to get past this idea of failing and like, that's okay? And that's, to your point, I always say fail, right? First attempt in learning, someone once told me. Do we have to have more of that mindset then, or is there something else you think that prevents people from truly owning this change?
Oh, I think you're right. I mean, when I talk about mindset, it's because the one thing that is my ultimate agency. That is the one thing when I feel, again, change is happening to me. That is the one area that I can retain my agency, is to think of my mindset. And that is not easy. I'm not oversimplifying it by any means. But if I can mindfully get back to that space, then I can more quickly shift that mindset. We have a bit of a motto in our office that we've had for probably back since 2015, that we are always actively exploring whether solutions to support students or new ways to build our community. And so we've carried that through. We actually have learning sessions that are called active explorations, and we have a huge sign on our wall, the visual, again, this was pre-pandemic when this went up, but a big sign that says actively exploring, and everybody puts their ideas up there. We have been trying to work on this sense of ownership of that change mindset for a really long time, but now the pressures are that much greater.
One, I love that, because I would argue we're always learning, right? There's never a point when any of us as humans is like, oh yeah, we know it all. There's nothing else we have to learn. And so I don't think the growth process ever stops, right? And
Yeah.
so it's being open to that and saying, we're going to talk about it. We're going to your point, do intentional activities together to like
Yeah.
work through it, celebrate it, all of those type things, right?
Yeah. You know, I read something years ago. This was before the flurry of the use of AI that we've seen in the last year, that referenced that the only way that humans will thrive, not just survive, but thrive in the digital age, was for us to be lifelong learners. And that stuck with me. So when I think about who stands to benefit most from my continued learning, I do. Who has the most control over what content I choose to put in my brain? Me. So that is so critical in holding on to our agency when we're thinking about how we learn. When we set our 2023 goals, again, we were kind of coming out of the dark, if I can call it that, over the last couple of years, and there were different categories. Certainly, primary role, individual project, task area, but two of the categories that we added really intentionally. One was personal learning and development. So that was dedicated entirely to the teams mindfully filling their brain with new learning that is going to be, and we left it, personal, professional, whatever that was. And then contribution to the greater team. So then how do you actively explore ways to bring that learning back into this space? And while we have highly structured processes for promoting and supporting professional development opportunities externally, this was really an opportunity to center that attention to individual and internal learning spaces. And I think that's been really fascinating and interesting discovery process.
One, it makes me think again back to the word I used, which was intentionality. And
That's
it's funny, I
right.
do so many of these training workshops with admissions teams, and I was ironically on a campus in Indiana last week doing one. And I said I didn't understand as a 20-year-old professional the importance of intentionality in everything we do in our lives. But I promise you, as I get close to 50 now, I fully understand the importance of intentionality, not just in my work, right? But just as a husband, a father, and all of those things.
That's right. We are, what you can weather in those early days is very different than what we can physically and mentally weather today. Yeah.
How do you deal? Because the other thing you mentioned was burnout, right? How do
Yeah.
you deal? Because I have to believe, if you're comfortable sharing, at some point in your 20 years, if not multiple times, you've started to feel, okay, this is not going in the direction I want it to go for me. What have you done that's been helpful over the years, if you're willing to share, just about dealing with it when you feel that sense of burnout coming on?
That's right. I've actually said that in the 20 plus years that I've been doing this, I never felt like this enrollment cycle was a hamster wheel. And some people could, you go around the sun, and you get to, I've always enjoyed it that you and been inspired by it, that you do this good work. We're serving students, and every year we get to think about new ways to improve on that. I had started in corporate, so this was a different experience to have that opportunity to go kind of back around the sun, if you will. But with COVID, because we were so sensitive to that burnout, that was the first time that I felt like I was a bit on that hamster wheel and had to really think intentionally about how to get off of that. And one of the things that really helped me was thinking about where I wanted to go. And to do that, I absolutely had to take stock and acknowledge where I was. And I saw this with staff too. I was so sensitive to this sense of burnout that if I got any sniff that someone was struggling or just wasn't responsive to the ideas we were pitching, then I would back off and I would stop short of setting maybe some more assertive expectations, or at least exploring those expectations. And that wasn't helping. What we needed that place to point. And so again, this past year with this new way of thinking about goal setting, I have seen energy return because we're pointing towards something. We're taking back that agency of the change we want to inform, the innovation we want to capture. And then we're celebrating those successes, creating an environment where we can celebrate victories, we can wildly express gratitude, and that loyalty is shared because we're all in this together. So that helped me and come out of this burnout stage, and I think I've seen it help the team as well.
Well, you talked about a lot of things there with your team, and I appreciate you sharing that. I think really hit on this, idea of culture, right? We hear a lot about culture and establishing as a leader, right? Whether you're a senior leader, you manage 3 staff, the numbers are relevant, but establishing a good culture where people feel, seen, heard, valued. What are some other things besides, for example, talking about change, being intentional with professional development, celebrating wins, all of which you've mentioned? Anything else that you feel like are foundational things? If a leader listening to this goes, I need to create a better culture, or a leader says, well, when I get that leadership opportunity at a higher level and I want to create a culture, these are foundational building blocks I need to make sure I'm doing so my team is getting the most in terms of what they get from me. Hey, it's Jeremy Tiers, and I want to personally invite you to Higher Ed's hottest event this summer, the Engage Summit, hosted in Raleigh, North Carolina on June 25th and 26th. The Engage Summit is your roadmap for AI readiness in higher education. Sessions will focus on cutting-edge AI applications that are reshaping student outreach, enhancing staff productivity, and offering deep insights into ROI. This isn't going to be your typical conference. It's a strategic summit where you'll learn from the best of the best about leveraging AI and digital strategies in higher ed marketing and admissions. Imagine 2 days filled with hands-on sessions, real success stories, and a chance to network with top minds in the field. You will leave with practical, transformative takeaways as you learn how AI fosters a more personalized, efficient approach from recruitment to student success. And here's the best part. The Engage Summit is incredibly affordable. Use the discount code ENROLLIFY50, that's ENROLLIFY50, and you can register for just $99. So join your favorite Enrollify Network creators at the Engage Summit this June. You can learn more and register at engage.element451.com. We can't wait to see you there.
Absolutely. There's a short little read that has some nuggets in it. It's called Leading in Tough Times. And there's a line in there that particularly stuck with me. And it references that there is great power where the vision of the organization and the dreams of the people come together. So we talk a lot when setting culture about having a vision and an organizational vision. But what struck me in that reminder is that every one of our individual team members has dreams about why they're here or where their being here gets them somewhere. And it's where those come together that the greatest power exists. So there are some, certainly when you're thinking about culture, there are some very kind of standard things that come through. The vision and values piece that I just referenced, certainly establishing trust and transparency. And we certainly saw this throughout the pandemic, that it was hard. And there was no way we were going to be able to gloss over the hard. So we had to be authentic in our leadership and transparent in what we were attempting to do, and that it was going to be hard. Promoting engagement and recognition, I referenced that is certainly a successful opportunity. That's where you get to celebrate and acknowledge those dreams that those individuals have, and show that they are certainly aligned with the vision. There are 2 more, I think, that I've read in recent research that have come up that I believe were always important, but maybe my generational value set didn't pull these to the top in the same way that I'm seeing with staff. And one is this individual learning and development. A lot of what created culture before were external conferences or training sessions that were delivered for me that I could go take part in. And what I'm seeing now is what we just talked about with the rate of change, specifically in technology, that individual accountability and ownership of learning is so much more important. And so we're focusing on that. And then the last one that I think is also very generational in enrollment, specifically in admissions, is this sense and importance of wellness and balance. Absolutely, that is culture building. Absolutely, that is important. But for so many years, we wore those late nights and weekends as just like our name badge on our shoulder. And we shared those stories with our peers when we got together. I think we can all recognize that was probably not the healthiest approach to any kind of sense of well-being. But now we've actually talked about as a staff, we're making it a goal to crack the code on how to do admissions with a sense of balance. And I just love that energy that's come out of that. So I think those are kind of the two or new areas that I've seen with this idea of building a positive culture. And we've definitely, by weaving those into how we are approaching our mission and vision and goals, has been pretty powerful. Yeah.
And so knowing that, again, a lot of schools have a small budget or possibly even no budget, what else can leaders do that you've seen to be successful when it comes to giving, we'll call it professional development opportunities? Because one of the mutual friends we have, and I'm sure you've heard DJ say this, DJ Menifee, is anyone can lead. It doesn't matter if you're in your territory and your title is admissions counselor or you're the senior VP of enrollment. You can all lead if you have that mindset. And so how else, professional development wise, can you help people grow in a leadership role?
Absolutely. So I'm going to come back to this learning is everything and everything is learning kind of theme that we've been talking about, because yes, what is it? Necessity is the mother of invention. I don't think many of us, if any of us, have budgets that will support all of our staff going to all of the places externally. And the reality is, as we got into this learning goal, that for some of our positions, there isn't a quintessential external learning space. So really thinking about how we build this in. I mentioned that we have this sense of active exploration, and that certainly speaks to you have some expertise in your area that you can contribute back to this team, or you have this research that you're doing or capable of doing, and bring that back to an active exploration session and share that, create a discussion about it. I mentioned we were working on our mission and vision after the pandemic. Let's reinvent this. Let's take a hard look at this. And as we listed our mission for the final stages of kind of that staff vetting, and they were looking at this and seeing how, if it connected with them, one of the staff members said, "This mission is what the leadership does, but I don't think I do this." And that was really interesting. And so as we unpacked that a little bit more, what I learned, it was the word strategic that was tripping that staff member up. They saw, I do great work here, and I know I do great work, but I don't see the strategy behind it. And so then as we looked at engaging staff differently, we had to think about, well, how do we help them understand that? So we tried some new things, so some nuggets if they're helpful for others. But one of the things that we did this summer is we had some pretty seismic shifts that we needed to do, or that we needed to consider. And we created staff work groups with staff from all different teams, all different levels, and their responsibility was to conduct the research relevant to that topic, whether through literature or benchmarking, to inform a solution. And so those were huge strategic things. We didn't do that at a leadership retreat. We did that as I think we had 3 of them, work groups across the organization. The other thing where I saw this example of shifting everything to learning come through was leading into the fall. We completely reimagined our file review training, pretty sure we're not the only team that was doing that. And as we were rumbling with the changes, I saw individual staff members respond differently based on the discomfort they were having or even anxiety they were experiencing. The fear of getting it wrong, you mentioned this, the fear of getting it wrong was so palatable. But as soon as we started framing the experience as learning, I saw a shift. The fear of getting it wrong lessened, since part of learning, just like you said, is getting a wrong answer. And the learning process then built agency. There's no way we were going to have all the answers with this. We're not going to have answers by the time we get to this end of the cycle. We're going to have to keep improving. But I heard staff then repeat this back. We are going to learn as much as we can to make the best decisions possible. And so pretty soon they weren't asking as many questions as they were proposing ideas and solutions. So when you, coming back to your question about how we think about professional development, I would say that was pretty powerful professional development, because someone took a very complex situation with a high level of scrutiny that is, put on how institutions are doing file review, and they found their agency within that. And now they could do a conference session on what they learned in that training, because they learned how to take from that experience. Those are just a couple of examples that have been really powerful this year specifically.
And I love how you just hit on this idea of, again, empowering your staff to take an active role, because too many leaders do, I would agree, say, here's the vision, and this staff has had absolutely zero input in it, or here's the mission, or here's how we're going to do professional development, active exploration, as you've called it. And you just go and do it. And some of the staff is over here going, yeah, that doesn't work for me, or I don't comprehend like why we have to do it this way. And sometimes people speak up and sometimes people don't speak up. But active listening, my gut tells me, is one of the many things you as a leader are probably very, very good at. But I'm also wondering, Sacha, because there's things that we all, right, end up getting better at over the years. What is something that you feel like, gosh, this was hard for me, but I know I've made good progress over the years in terms of your leadership ability? What skill have you improved?
I appreciate that you asked that so much, Jeremy, and I appreciate the kind words that you shared, because one of my personal goals actually from this last year was intentionally to disrupt my own leadership style. We're going to apple cart upset this, and we're going to take a hard look. I really wanted to force myself to take this hard look at specifically where, and I kind of referenced this earlier, but where my leadership style and any instances where I may have felt that we could have done more or done differently, or had different output, could be connected. I'm not talking causation, because I can't be in someone else's mind and do that work, but certainly possible correlation. And for anyone who has done kind of this self work, it's a hard pill to get down for sure. But what do they say? Self-leadership begins with self-evaluation. So really wanted to be intentional about this. So asking questions, what expectations, if any, had I communicated? Did we even discuss what a positive outcome could look like? What support did I offer to inform or encourage progress? And then what accountability measures did we look at? So those were just some simple questions. As I got into it, I realized that I was maybe where I thought backing off because I sensed someone was overwhelmed, when they actually needed me to lean in and just maybe be supportive in a different way, provide different structure. And, sometimes it is best, if possible, to avoid a storm, right? We go and we make preparations and we do all of this, but there's also the theory that when it hits, the fastest approach to sunny skies is to go through it. And I think finding that balance in this post-pandemic space has been really hard for me, because I genuinely care about the well-being of each individual. But part of a leader is also knowing when things like accountability or holding someone accountable or helping them set goals and helping them achieve them means that you need to push sometimes. And I think that was a big moment for me as a leader to kind of reckon and rumble with that. And now as we're starting this 2024 from a position of different strength, still wild uncertainty, but we have definitely more confidence in our ability to learn and adapt. And part of that started with me reckoning with how I was not supporting that in every situation.
Thank you for sharing that. And I say all the time to leaders, it's hard to take care of your team if you don't take care of yourself, right? And
That's right.
not just from a self-discovery, self-awareness, self-evaluation standpoint, but the other thing then I would love to piggyback off of, because you got me thinking about that, I know I've heard, especially at your VP level, and ironically, even with a few presidents I've had conversations with over the last year, this idea, Sacha, of self-isolation. I don't know if you've ever felt it, but like when you are so deep in the weeds, like I know you are at your level, and as you talk with your peers who are at that same level, any thoughts, or just how you would, if somebody's listening to this and they're going, gosh, I feel isolated all the time, just thoughts on how to handle that or where to start?
So many thoughts and feelings, Jeremy. Thanks for asking that question. So the feeling of being on an island is real. And you're right, connection is so important. We say it all the time, but it's absolutely important for a leader, both to be connected to the team, but also to a peer group. And when you're in these roles, it can be much harder to establish those. And in fact, sometimes I find it much easier to establish connections to my team because my job is to foster trust. And so then that is returned to me. Doing that with peers, things, considerations for who can I trust, who can I form these connections with, how do I go deeper into this, those are a little bit trickier. We've talked about this already, but just like anything else, you have to be intentional. I've had to be really mindful and intentional about fostering trusting relationships with peers. And so I think about this, it actually could sound a little like dating. So you start with a few lunches, and then those lunches may turn into post-work conversations. But those relationships are critical for the connection they provide, but then also certainly for advancing our work through collaboration. So there's different opportunities there. I will say I do have deep and valued friendships with individuals at all levels of the organization. So when I talk about peers, I have worked hard to establish this trusted peer group at the level that I am within the organization. But I have really valued friendships at all levels. And I think what makes that work is that we have been pretty intentional about having and maintaining a clear understanding of where there may be and should be boundaries that have to be set to preserve that friendship. So certain topics we just don't bring up. Certain names we just don't bring up. But there's a whole world of other things that we have found value in our friendship. And so we can remain honest and open if conversations go to uncomfortable spaces, but they rarely do because we've established that trust. The other thing that I'll mention here, one other leadership experience that's been kind of more of a gut punch recently is just a matter of not being alone because of role. I'm finding that I am in spaces within our team where I am the only one of a certain generation. And this just creates a different shift in how I connect and what role I serve. It does not mean that those connections are not so important and highly relevant. They're just different. And so that's just been another space where I need to be mindful about how I set those connections. But at all levels, in all spaces, as a leader, you really need to shore up your group and multiple groups, because if it's successful for our team members, then why would it not be so important for us?
The last thing I do, Sacha, on every episode is something I call fun rapid fire. So I'm just going to give you a handful of questions, and I just want your initial gut reaction and answer to them, okay?
Okay.
Bigger IU rival, Purdue or Kentucky?
Depends on where you live in the state.
My wife would say both.
Yes.
Favorite book you've read in the last year?
Leading from anywhere that really helped me post-pandemic.
Coffee or tea drinker?
Coffee. Want to be tea, but really love coffee.
Starbucks go-to order is what then?
Pike Place. Nothing else.
Simple and easy. I love it. What is your biggest pet peeve, if you're willing to share?
When I can't tell if somebody is approaching me with authenticity. Masks.
And how would your parents describe what you do?
I think after 20 plus years, I think they would say I help people find their way to college. But after 20 years, it's taken.
It's funny how, right, I got asked that the other day by one of my daughter's friends, and what do you do, Mr. Tears? And I was like, do I explain? So anyways, it's funny how, as obvious as it seems, just trying to verbalize it is always a lot of fun.
I tell team members, it's one of the things that lean into your team here, because no one will ever understand what you do the way these people do. Your family will try, and they will love you and be inspired by what you do. But these people and everyone across the profession, I mean, worldwide, they will understand what you do differently than what your loved ones do.
Thank you so much just for all the nuggets and things you were willing to share today, and just for being so open. I have no doubt our audience was able to take away a ton of it, and I appreciate you spending some time and sharing your thoughts with us today, Sacha.
Well, Jeremy, thank you for, and so many of our colleagues that are entering this space and using this platform to help support one another. I really appreciate the learning that I gained from it, and thankful to be here. So thank you.
You're welcome. And I appreciate everyone for listening, and look forward to the next conversation I have to share with you.
Hey, all, Zach here from Enrollify. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Mission Admissions with Jeremy Tears. If you like this episode, do us a huge favor and hit that follow and subscribe button below. Furthermore, if you've got just 2 minutes to spare, we would greatly appreciate you leaving a rating and a review of this show on Apple Podcasts. Our podcast network is growing by the month, and we've got a plethora of marketing, admissions, and higher ed technology shows that are jam-packed with stories, ideas, and frameworks that are all designed to empower you to become a better higher ed professional. But Enrollify is far more than just a podcast network. Enrollify is where higher ed comes to learn new marketing skills, discover new products and services, and find their next job. We're a growing learning community of 4,000 members, and we'd love to welcome you into the fold. You can access our free blog articles, newsletters, e-courses, and more, or purchase our master course on how to market a university with Terry Flannery at enrollify.org. We look forward to meeting you soon and welcoming you into the community. Again, you can subscribe for free at enrollify.org.